Just a heads up before you watch this podcast, if you haven't seen The Princess Bride, please turn it off right now and just go watch it. If you have seen it, then come along for the ride. Me and Nick are going to dive into some of our favorite moments, our favorite scenes, and we hope you enjoy it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Minutemen Films Podcast. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing great. We're talking about one of my favorite movies today.
Me too. It's on my favorite movies of all time as well. The Princess Bride. I don't know why I did peace sign there, but The Princess Bride.
It's this that got you in your head.
Oh, yeah, true. What is that hat?
It's from the movie that I worked on with Zachary Gordon. I say I worked on it. I was just there on set taking out the trash.
Is that the one where you met the gentleman from Diary of a Wimpy Kid?
Yes.
Greg Heffley, the actor who played him?
He asked me
That's
where the
awesome.
bathroom was.
Dude, you're a hero. If you didn't point out where the bathroom was, he wouldn't have been able to relieve himself properly, therefore halting the production.
I basically saved the movie, is what you're saying.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So we're going to be talking about The Princess Bride today, and it is a movie that I think gets better with every watch through. The first time I watched it, I was like, that was pretty good. And the second time I watched it, I was like, that was awesome. And so on and so on. Every time since, you just appreciate it more and more. Would you say the same for your viewing experience?
I guess so. I just loved it right from the get-go. You know, I would see it on TV, and it was one of those movies. I think the first scene I ever saw was the sword fight between the Dread Pirate Roberts, Wesley, and Inigo Montoya. That was the first thing I ever saw on TV, and I was just swept up right away in the magic of it all.
I never saw the movie on TV. I actually discovered it in high school. I had a ceramics teacher that was super cool, and we would always talk about movies back and forth and recommend stuff to each other. And he recommended The Princess Bride to me, and he would always quote the movie. I remember him specifically saying, it's probably a local fisherman out on a pleasure cruise at night in eel-infested waters. So I watched it after he told me to, and then we would always talk about the movie and like quote it back to each other. And that's how I first discovered it. And I always remember that because he was like one of the coolest teachers I ever had.
That's really funny because this is like one of the most insanely quotable movies of all time. Like just every single sentence I feel like is quotable, but it's interesting that random ass quote was the one he would say to you. I was like, really? That one?
I don't
That's
know.
his quote of choice?
Yeah, because I was just like, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. But anyway, so that's how I discovered the movie. But I feel like the name Princess Bride has actually prevented a large amount of our generation, a large percentage of our generation, from watching this movie. And that's sad. But I think it's actually true because the word princess, I think, deters a lot of guys. I remember recommending the movie to friends. You know, I'd be hanging out with friends, be like, guys, you want to watch The Princess Bride? And they'd be like, what are you, a girl? You know, Princess Bride? Why would you want to watch that? They just don't get it, you know, because the word princess. Same thing with Mean Girls. Great movie. Because the word girl is in the title, a lot of guys just instantly don't want to watch it, even though it's a great movie.
I think the genius of this movie is that it kind of predicts exactly what you just said. The whole framing device of the grandpa coming in to read the story to the young Fred Savage. And he's like, is there any sports in this? He's like, oh, there's everything you could ever want. There's adventure, there's action, there's torture. I like that he uses torture as a selling point to this little boy. But that's what's so great about it is he's like, this is a classic old school fairy tale. It has everything you could ever want. It's the birth of storytelling, basically.
If you had to name it something else, what would you name it if you couldn't use the name Princess Bride?
What the hell? I don't know. I think it's a perfect title. What do you mean? That's a silly question.
Me, I would say, like, what's your name?
What?
My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. That was
You're so right.
I thought about that last night and I was like crying. What's your name?
No, but the title, I heard from what I read, the title was William Goldman, who's like a 2-time Oscar-winning screenwriter. He was going to write a book, and he's like, he asked his daughters what he should write about, and one of them was like a princess, and the other one was like a bride, and he's like, sounds good to me, and he just combined both and made the ultimate fantasy adventure movie.
That's a cool story. I didn't know that. This movie is just so easy to watch. Like every single piece of dialogue is gold coming out of the mouth. Like it's all so smooth and flows so perfectly together. Perfectly written script, in my opinion.
It just flows so well. Like it's perfectly paced. It's just constantly moving. You're never bored. I was watching and I was like, oh my God, I'm an hour of the way through and I'm like, I'm almost done with it. I wish it was like 3 hours long. It's so good. I want more of it, but it's just breezy. It's in and out so quick.
I couldn't agree more. When they were getting ready to raid the castle at the end, and Wesley was like, what am I doing here? With his like Weekend at Bernie shtick. I was like, oh my God, we're already at the end. It just perfectly flows through. Oh, by the way, before we go on, just want to say this is the first movie that we're reviewing that wasn't in my DVD rotation as a child.
That's interesting.
Every time we get to a DVD rotation movie, I will announce it. This one was not, officially. No DVD rotation. I did not see it till high school, like I said earlier. I know you probably remember, but when we were at college, we tried showing our friend Christian this movie. And he was not in... Yeah, we tried showing it to Christian, and he listens to this podcast, so shout out to Papa, Christian Papa. Why did he not like the movie?
I don't remember. I don't even remember showing him this. I know we showed him Pirates of the Caribbean, and he was like not into that, but I have no memory of showing him this movie.
It was like our junior or senior year, and we showed him this movie, and instantly he's like, oh, I thought it was like a real movie, not a fake movie about a movie. Or something like that.
Christian,
like he didn't know it was going to be like a parody of itself. I think
he wanted actual fairy tales.
That was his initial comment, but I remember him even after the movie ended. He was like, that was good. It wasn't great, and me and you were like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Well, next time we see Christian, we'll put on Errol Flynn's Robin Hood, and he can watch that. He'll enjoy that much more. One thing that I'll say I really love about this movie is a lot of the sets, the production of it all. So, I mean, the first part I really noticed it was the boats on the ocean. It doesn't look particularly real, but it has this almost dreamlike quality to it. It looks like what you would see in like a storybook. All you see is just open water and the boat's just sitting on the water, and it's like really dark. Got this like whimsical, childlike image to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it really does have a perfect fairy tale kind of vibe. And I think the first shot where they're getting on the boat, it was a real lake or a real river. But 100% the night scene is on a set, a soundstage with water.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to look convincing too, but it just looks so striking and interesting that I love it so much. And the rest of the movie is pretty much shot on location anyway. So you have all these like beautiful landscapes in like the Midlands of England that look just incredible. There's so many like beautiful set pieces. And I also noticed the Cliffs of Insanity. When he points that out, I was like, those look familiar. And I immediately recognized they're the Cliffs of Moher, which are in County Clare, Ireland, which I got to visit last year. Beautiful cliff sides on Ireland where it's really windy. It's very hazardous. You got to go on the right day if you want to have a good time there. I'll show you some pictures later. But it's been used in a lot of movies, too. They use this as the establishing shot for the Cliffs of Insanity. But it was also the Horcrux Cave in Half-Blood Prince, so I know you would like that fact.
That is awesome. I was thinking about like what other movies were shot there, so that's cool. You helped me out. Another thing, that's really great is the casting. We talk about this with every movie we review pretty much, but Andre the Giant as Fezzik is such a perfect casting. It's a shame that he was not doing too well physically during the movie. And they even talk about it a little bit in the Andre documentary about certain scenes he had trouble with. And when we talk about, stunts and action sequences later, I'll point out a few things that I noticed in this watch through. It's just sad to think about that he was in pain, but it's really nice and sweet to know that how much he enjoyed the movie and loved being a part of it. And I heard stories where after it was filmed, you know, when he was on the road with wrestling and everything, he would bring VHS tapes to show his friends the movie in case they hadn't seen it yet.
That's awesome. No, yeah, Andre's definitely like one of the more interesting elements of this film because he didn't do a lot of movies. This is easily his biggest role. For the role of the Giant, they were like, oh, he's perfect. Like he was who William Goldman imagined for the role when he wrote it back in the early 70s. They tried to get him, but they couldn't do it back then. And they said when they hired him, a lot of the cast members said they thought his English would be the hardest part to deal with. He was fine with the English. It was the physicality that was so hard for him. And like, I didn't even know that until watching those behind the scenes interviews and those documentaries because he was just so broken down physically from wrestling. You just see him wrestling Hulk Hogan and all these guys. Not even wrestling
like his gigantism.
Well, for sure, but the wrestling didn't help.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a mixture of both things. But I'm sure if he wasn't still growing at that point, his skeleton probably wouldn't have been, you know, carrying such a load.
You know, the film industry, for all its faults, is a lot more nice than the wrestling industry. You know, they're like, oh, we can put these guys on cables. We'll make it easier for you, Andre. The wrestling industry has no sympathy. No, they're going to be like, no, Andre, we need you to come back. We need to sell out the Pontiac Silverdome. You got to come back, Andre. No sympathy.
The first thing that I really noticed that probably was a physical challenge for Andre, and the shot probably would have been different. Let's say he was perfectly healthy, but him lifting Buttercup out of the water, he grabs her and then it just cuts to her in the boat and he's like leaning over like he's dropping her, but it's so obvious that he wasn't actually holding her. Let's say Andre was in perfect shape and he was very healthy. I feel like they would have filmed him actually just hoisting her out of the water and placing her in the boat, you know, carefully. But because of his physical limitations, I feel like that's why they did the quick cut for her to already be inside the boat.
I'm sure you're right. I mean, he couldn't even hold her like with both his hands at the end of the movie. Like she had to be in cables for that. So, you know, it was just the whole thing was just really difficult for him, shockingly.
Speaking of shockingly, what did you think of the shrieking eels?
You know, when I was watching this, I remembered being a child and thinking electric eels and quicksand were going to be way more prominent things I had to fear in my life. And I've never once encountered an electric eel or quicksand. So this movie scared me for no reason.
Me too, dude. I used to watch like the Survivor Man, Bear Grylls. Also, I remember seeing Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. There was a quicksand scene in that too, but I've never encountered it, and I don't plan on it. So I agree.
Shia LaBeouf grabs a giant-ass snake to help Indy out of the quicksand.
Don't call it a snake. Call it a rope. What? Grab the rope. Anybody else in the cast, you know, really stick out to you as a great performance?
Chris Sarandon as Prince Humperdinck is just the most detestable, vile man you've ever seen. And Humperdinck is just such a great name. It's like the worst name ever conceived. It's like got this like essence
like
of douchiness. Yeah, it's like somehow at the same time really douchey and pretentious and also pathetic. Humperdinck. It's just the worst name I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, Humperdinck. Wesley is phenomenal. All the quick dialogue and his ability to be charming, but also strikingly intimidating when he needs to be. Like, he's not afraid of death at any moment. Like, he'll do anything to get through this situation. What's the actor? I also love, what's the actor that plays Wesley's name? I forget. I'm sorry.
Carrie Elways.
He also is in Liar Liar, another one of my favorite movies. He plays the stepdad to be.
Oh, yeah. I remember that now. I was going to say,
Yeah.
all I know him from is Saw.
Oh, shit. I forgot he was in Saw.
Yeah, he cuts off his leg.
I know. There's really not an actor in this production that you can say did a bad job. Even the small roles like Miracle Max, Billy Crystal, boom, home run, knocked it out of the park.
You let Billy Crystal improv, and you're always going to have a knock it out of the park with that scene. I heard him and Carol Kane like came up with backstory for their characters to figure out why they're so angry in their marriage, and that's what they played off of, is their shared backstory they came up with. When I was young, my favorite character was always Inigo Montoya. I just thought he was cool, and I loved his story of revenge. I wanted to see him avenge his father and kill the six-fingered man. It just really like got your sympathies. He was an easy character to root for, even though he was working for Vicini, the bad guys kidnapping the princess. You could just tell him and Fezzik were actually good guys, and so like he just sets
He's the
himself
ultimate
up
baby
as
face.
like easy baby face, and he's just so like honorable and easy to root for. Like when he's just letting Wesley like climb to the top, like because he's like, hey, you're taking too long. Can you speed this up a little bit?
I don't mean to be rude, but this is very difficult. I love that. But I can totally agree with that. Inigo Montoya is one of the easiest characters to root for because he has such a clear motive. And so many movies now have villains that you really don't care that much about, or you really don't feel the hatred for. They're just kind of a villain because we need a villain. And getting to see them get beat up or get, killed at the end of the movie isn't always super satisfying to the audience, or you don't actually like feel it emotionally. Even though the six-fingered man only has like maybe 15 minutes of screen time in the whole movie, seeing Inigo Montoya finally take him out is one of the most satisfying kills on screen in movie history. And I don't even think that that's a bad take or a stretch at all. I think that's perfectly valid for me to say.
No, and right before that too, when they're just running around the castle, he's chasing him down, and he throws the knife, and it just gets Inigo in the stomach. And he's like, I'm sorry, Father. That's the most disappointing scene in movie history, because they cut away from it, too. I was like, are you kidding? He's dead? I was Fred Savage in bed. I was like, he's dead? He can't die? And they wait for a while before they cut back, and they reveal that he's like still got some strength in him. He's going to keep fighting on.
The heel results to cheating, right? He can't win him in a straight-up fight, so he has to cut down the babyface. Then the babyface starts hulking up. He's getting the sword. He goes for his heart, pushes it to the arm, goes for his heart, pushes it to the other arm. My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. He hulks up. He comes back. He hits the comeback. He avenges his father, and it's an awesome moment. Typical wrestling moment on screen, and it works. Anybody that likes good storytelling secretly likes wrestling. They just don't know it.
It all goes back to just classic storytelling. It's just, that's why Peter Falk Columbo sets it up in the beginning of the movie. There's a story that's got everything you could ever want. And yeah, pro wrestling's like the same thing. It's got everything you could ever want.
I also love when he first confronts the six-fingered man, and he's like, we're going to fight. And then he just runs.
Cowardly heel.
I know. In a movie, you don't always expect the bad guy to do that, but it just boom. And it's a long shot, too. Like, it's not just like 1 second. They show him running down the entire hallway.
I mean, yeah, a big element of this movie is like the sense of humor to it. Like, even though it like takes all the tropes of like fairy tales and fantasy stories, it does so in a very like meta and postmodern way, where they're constantly being self-referential and like playing along with the tropes a little bit and just being more self-aware and being tongue-in-cheek with it all.
That's what's beautiful about it. Another great performance, the gentleman that plays Vicini. He plays Rex in Toy Story. When I was a kid, I would always recognize his voice in certain movies.
Yeah, he's great. He has probably the best scene in the whole movie, the Battle of Wits with the poisoned cups. That scene used to be my favorite scene, and I think I've watched it I've just like looked up that scene on YouTube just to watch that scene. I think I've watched it so many times that it's just not funny to me anymore. It's just a scene that happens.
You've given everything away. I can't even do his voice. It's so unique.
That's just a great showcase of how funny this script is and just how absurd these characters are. Is just how much he just rambles on and makes no sense at all. That even Wesley's just watching on and enjoying like what he's seeing before him.
You could really, give testament to the director and the writer as well, because they're able to create the same level of entertainment with a sword fight as they can with two guys sitting down, just, talking to each other. And not a lot of directors can create the same level of value from that kind of scene to that kind of scene.
You know what's crazy about that first sword fight with Wesley and Inigo is like they had to be trained in their left and right hands just for a gag. It's literally a gag that they're both using their left hands, but they had to be seriously, legitimately trained to do the choreography and do that fight scene. It's incredible.
Yeah, dude, it's no joke. It's no joke. They must have spent months and months training for that scene because I'm sure that, Capoferro, all the different sword fighting techniques, they actually had to learn. There's probably still classes today, honestly, teaching Hollywood people how to sword fight. I remember Count Dooku, Christopher Lee, used to talk about it. I remember seeing behind the scenes for Attack of the Clones. He was talking about how he's one of the most highly trained sword fighters in all of Hollywood. His legs just don't work anymore because he's old, so he needs a stunt double.
I didn't know about that.
So,
that's interesting.
What they do now in movies for actors who need a stunt double is they'll just CGI their face over the stunt double. They did that with Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones. In The Princess Bride, we talked about Andre and how he had difficulty with some scenes. His fight scene with Wesley was very hard for him. Apparently, he had a very rough time on set. And I was specifically looking for when, the stunt doubles were involved. And oftentimes, you'll hide a stunt double with hair or with a mask. Like Wesley's stunt double was easy to hide because he would always wear the mask when he did the flip or other moments in the movie. For Fezzik, Andre the Giant, there's this one wide shot where Wesley is choking him, and you could clearly see that the stunt double is just wearing a mask of Andre's face. So that's how they did that shot. Whenever they needed a close-up, they probably had Wesley on some kind of support device behind Andre to make it look like he was still on top of him without having to put his weight on his back.
Yeah, for sure. They had to do a lot of workarounds for that scene in particular because Andre just was very limited in what he could do. And so, they do a pretty good job hiding it. I think there's just that one shot where you can clearly see the mask when he bumps him against the rock. That's the most famous instance of seeing him.
Definitely. There are other moments that we'll talk about where I noticed Andre's stunt double. That's probably the most visible moment. I just want to say real quick, the mask technique has been around in Hollywood for so long that I noticed it recently too watching The Three Stooges. They did a lot of their own stunts, but there's this one moment in an episode, probably the most famous Three Stooges episode, Disorder in the Court, where Curly goes to sit down in the chair in the courtroom. And it's so clearly a stunt double wearing a Curly mask, and he just, wipes out of the chair. I guess he just didn't want to do that stunt. They deemed it too dangerous for him or something. But just thought I'd bring that up.
We mentioned how quotable this movie is. That you said you made a list of your favorite lines in the movie.
You were unemployed in Greenland! We'll just go back and forth. What's your favorite line?
I love the more simple ones, the ones you can actually say in real life. So I like when Inigo's you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means, because I'm constantly saying that all the time to everybody.
I love that. Do you by any chance have 6 fingers? You seem like a decent fellow. I hate to kill you.
You seem a decent fellow. I hate to die.
It's not my fault I'm the biggest and the strongest. I don't even exercise.
When Wesley comes up to Andre, and he's like, so we put down our weapons and we kill each other like civilized men? I could kill you right now.
Smell this. I smell nothing. What you don't smell is iocane powder. Another thing that I quote, which is really random how it's my most quotable quote for this movie, I always yell, "The Queen of Slime! The Queen of Filth!" I don't know why, but that one always pops into my head.
When Robin Wright is with the king, and she's like, "You were always so nice to me, and this is the last time we'll see each other, because I'll be killing myself when we reach the honeymoon suite." And he's like, "Won't that be nice?"
Another quote that I do yell sometimes, when somebody pisses me off on the internet or something, I always yell "I would not say such things if I were you." What about when Andre just goes, "Everybody move"?
It's great. I love every moment with Andre.
Another thing that my art teacher, my ceramics teacher used to quote, he used to go, "Marriage is what brings us together." I think I remember your favorite quote, if I'm correct.
I don't know. What did I say it was?
Fezzik, I need you! Fezzik, please!
It's so good because it's really funny how like desperate he is, but it's also it makes sense. Like he's like been waiting his whole life to fucking kill this guy, and now the only thing stopping him is a door that's locked. He's just like Fezzik, please. And then Fezzik's like, oh,
I love that.
okay. He like puts like Wesley on the knight's costume.
That's great. I also love the moment when Andre actually punches it down. It's like one of the coolest moments I think in the movie where they display his strength as a giant. He just easily booms and then he goes, "Whoop," and Yuga Montoya goes, "Thank you," and then he just runs away. It's a great moment.
Where are we ever going to get a Holocaust cloak? I have one right here. Where'd you get that? Local Max. It fits so nice you said I could keep it.
One of my favorite shots in the movie is when Fezzik is trying to revive Inigo Montoya, and he's dunking his head in the water back and forth, back and forth. First time I saw it, I was like, huge pop. I was laughing big. But the movie, the way they edited it, it was so subtle. Like the narration from the grandpa is over it. It doesn't even feel like the director really wanted you to focus on it too hard. But it was probably the hardest I ever laughed, like watching in my Princess Bride
that's part of the joke is Columbo is like, Fezzik took great care of Inigo, and you just see him dumping his head over and over and over again. It's the contrast of what's being said and what's actually happening.
You're right.
I love every time we come back to the bedroom with the grandpa and the kid, the way that he just like interferes in the story with the eel scene is happening, and he's like, she doesn't get killed at this time. Like the movie's not afraid to reveal.
That was
like,
a really good impersonation.
I've seen so many clips of Columbo on Twitter, you have no idea.
You even made like the perfect like gesture and face movement too.
But yeah, like the movie's not afraid to just reveal what's going to happen because like I feel like we all know the tropes at this point. Like when the kid like just bursts in and he's like, who's going to kill Humperdinck? Who is it? Is it Inigo? He's like, nobody kills him. And as a kid, I was like, oh, that's bullshit. Nobody kills him? What the fuck? And then I just had to wait and watch the rest of the movie to see what happens. But I was very annoyed that Humperdinck doesn't die.
I mean, but him tied up, you know, being a coward for the rest of his life, they kind of explain like he's not going to be getting off scot-free, you know?
I'm saying I felt like the kid watching the movie, being told the story. I was reacting in real time like he was, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I was just thinking about another scene, but I don't remember what it was. Oh, dude, remember the torture scene? That was really messed up.
Everything in the movie, year of your life away.
Everything in the movie is generally not too creepy or disturbing. The rodents of unusual size are kind of creepy and gross, like if you're a kid. But that torture scene, I gotta imagine anybody under like 8 years old, that was probably a pretty messed up scene to watch as a kid. When he sucks his life away, that one wide shot where his body is just spazzing out like crazy, like it's a little disturbing to watch even now. So if I was like 7, 8 years old in the movie theater, I would be freaked out by that.
I saw it when I was pretty young, and that scene wasn't really what got me the most. I think the scene of Wesley being attacked by the rodent of unusual size was that, for me, that was that very distressing scene. I don't know what it is, but it's just they're really ugly looking creatures, and just being attacked by an animal is such like a primal fear. It was so dark and like moody, that scene, and like he kills it by like rolling it over onto the fire pit and it just sets on fire, and then he stabs it with his sword multiple times. As a kid, that scene's very fucking disturbing. You know, I don't want to see an animal get burned and stabbed twice in the heart.
I agree. I would say that scene and the torture scene are the top two, like, whoa moments if you're younger. So I can't argue with that. I would say also it's probably the first time in the movie we see Wesley with any kind of vulnerability at all. He kind of waltzed through his first 3 tests, and then this rodent, I think it bites him. He starts bleeding. He gets a little bit burnt from the fire. It's the first time we see any kind of, you know, splashback to his flawless run, you know, his speed run of this movie.
That's a good point. I never even thought of that. That's like his first like actual challenge. He dispatches everybody else with ease, and then that's the one point where you're like, oh shit, is he gonna die here?
Yeah. And then obviously he can't take on 7 guys at once or 6 guys at once, whatever it was. So he just had to go quietly with Humperdinck, and getting tortured really fucks him up. So he's kind of not himself for the rest of the movie up until the end. But he's got the gift of gab, bro. He's got the mic skills because when Humperdinck was like, I'm going to kill you now, I always thought, like, what's stopping him from just walking over and stabbing Wesley? But Wesley just shit talks and just keeps going and going. Humperdinck gets so scared. The fact that Wesley can even stand up, he's like, ah! Drops the sword. Drop your sword.
I mean, yeah, who wouldn't be caught in their tracks when you're called a warthog-faced buffoon? Like, what a perfect sequence of just nasty things to call somebody.
He's the best promo in the whole movie by far. I don't think he's as much of a babyface, though, as Inigo Montoya. I think he's number one, but Wesley's number two.
They're both great, but as a kid, I always identified with Inigo's struggle more to try and avenge his father. I do love what you said, though, just to go back a little bit, like the physical acting of Cary Elwes as Wesley when he's like not having his full strength back. Just so many great ragdoll moments. Yes, I love it. And he's just like waving his head around. It's so good.
Yeah. I like when they're looking at the guards outside the castle and Fezzik is helping him to see behind, and he's like with one eye, like trying to see the gate. Also, that reminds me of another great moment when Fezzik says to Inigo Montoya, he goes, "There's probably 30 men. I could only take 10 by myself." And then Inigo Montoya goes, "That leaves 20 for me. I couldn't, even at my best, I couldn't handle that many." He takes like 10 seconds to figure it out. That's great.
It's a genius script. These characters are all just so fun and like lively. It's infectious. I can't believe Christian didn't like this movie. Now I'm mad at Christian. How does he not like this movie?
Dude, I'm gonna see him this weekend, so I'll make sure I give him the jab. You gotta like
him watch it again.
Bro. Give it another chance. Maybe, dude. It's probably going to be that or Spider-Man 2, so we'll see. Even going back, I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but the Miracle Max scene, I don't think there's one line. I was watching very closely. I don't think there's one line that Billy Crystal says that isn't an original and flawless delivery. Like, there's no line wasted that comes out of his mouth. Everything's either funny or it's said in such an interesting way that you just want to hear what comes out of his mouth next. Like, he's just pure charisma and entertainment in that scene. You think it'll work? It'll take a miracle. Yeah.
He's only got like 3 minutes of screen time, and he shows up so late in the movie. You're like, there's no more characters to introduce, and then he just comes in, and he's one of the best parts of the movie. It's incredible.
I 100% agree.
Scene stealer.
There's really not a lot you could even say bad about this movie. Vicini feels a part of the beginning. He's kind of like our first kind of antagonist. And then we go right into Six Finger Man, Humperdinck. And then, Miracle Max is a good guy that we see for a little bit. Like, there's always a new character being introduced all the way up until the very end, I feel like. There's always something new happening or some new character coming in. And there's never, like, a bad character that isn't good. Besides maybe the albino. He's kind of boring. He's gross, dude. I always thought that whenever I watched the movie. He's just nasty.
I love his introduction, though, going back to, like, the self-aware humor. He's like, "You're in the pit of despair." Don't even think of trying to escape, man.
Yeah. "You're in the pit of despair. You're never getting out of here." I love that. It's just really genius. Can we try my new segment on the podcast?
Let's hear it.
You know how when we watch movies together, we watch so many movies together, I often point at the screen and say, "Oh, there's the stunt double."
Yeah.
It's not something that ever takes away from the movie. There's a lot of great movies where you could see how certain effects are done, but it's just something like my brain always does and I like to point out. Watching this movie, I know we already kind of talked about it a little bit, especially because the Andre situation, but I was specifically looking for moments with the stunt doubles. We talked about a few of them already, like in the sword fight scene. For the most part, like you said, Inigo Montoya and Wesley were doing the sword fighting by themselves. I think the only part there really was a stunt double is when Wesley does that gnarly flip. But, with the mask, it's so easy to hide him, so you can't really even tell that it's a stunt double. Same thing with Inigo Montoya. His hair is so fluffy, they could have easily snuck somebody in there. A really cool moment that, if you look closely, you could actually see the stunt double's face clearly, is the falling scene with Wesley and Buttercup. because Wesley's mask actually falls off halfway down the hill, and you could clearly see it's like a guy in his 50s with gray hair falling down the hill. I thought that was cool to see, and I'm like 90% sure that Buttercup was a guy.
Probably was. Have you seen the Spaceballs stunt double scene? They're always these like ugly, gross looking men.
That's exactly what I was thinking. But you just see like the shoulders, and it looks like a guy's frame. Obviously, the fire stunt is just a dummy. All the close-ups are Andre, and the wide shots are just a statue. So or a dummy. There's no reason to even go into that. It's really obvious though, because they like close in the curtain on the dummy's face like this, and then when you see a close up of Andre, it's like wide. If I would have probably, if I was on set, tried to make it a little tighter. You know, you mentioned it earlier, the scene where Andre catches Buttercup. They had her on strings. They talk about it in the Andre the Giant documentary. But did you ever notice that when Andre hops on the horse, it's somebody who's like way smaller than Andre, because Andre obviously is too heavy to ride a horse? The first thing that came to mind was Nathan For You. And remember they had the weather balloons to help a big guy ride the horse to make him lighter?
I do remember that, yeah.
I like moments like that. It's just funny because Andre's so big. As soon as the stunt double stands in, you know, the guy's like 6 foot tall max. You know, it must be really hard to find a stunt double for a 7'1" guy, you know, who's that big.
Andre's a very noticeable man, and as soon as you take him out, it's like, oh, that's not Andre the Giant.
Yeah, it was like some small guy riding the horse, just wearing his wig. Stuff like that, it's just fun to notice. It doesn't take away from the quality of the movie at all. It's still a fantastic movie. And I say the same thing about every movie that I watch, you know. Even in Gladiator, there's a moment where you could like see the hydraulics they used to like flip one of the chariots. And obviously that hydraulic doesn't exist in ancient Rome, but it doesn't hurt the movie at all. It's just cool to notice it when you're watching the movie. It's just like, hey, that's how they did that. I've been watching a lot of Star Trek original series lately. You know, I've been messaging you about it. As far as stunt doubles go and, you know, not noticing them, they make no effort to hide Captain Kirk at all. Every fight scene that he has, they'll like throw a punch in a close-up, and then they'll cut to a wide shot. There'll be somebody that looks nothing like him at all playing his stunt double. They have like different ones every episode too. They couldn't find a guy that looked kind of like him and just stick with him. They're constantly cycling out stunt doubles, and they make no effort to hide his face at all during the fight scenes. And it just makes me think, was William Shatner just afraid to do like the most basic fight choreography ever? You know, like a little tiny roll or flip or whatever? Or were the directors or the producers of CBS like so scared that he would get hurt that they forced him to have a stunt double for the most, you know, basic situations? Interesting to think about. I'm sure some Star Trek people would know. I'm more of a casual fan. Maybe it's also they didn't care as much because the TVs back in the 60s were a lot worse. So cutting to a wide shot probably was enough to not notice that it wasn't, you know, William Shatner. But now it's blatantly obvious.
Rewind.
Yeah, exactly. We could rewind. We have a giant TVs now, so it's so much easier to see.
Everything's under so much more scrutiny now that we can constantly just replay, rewind. Those things are more noticeable. The cinema sins culture makes everything more like everyone's trying to like hide those little movie mistakes now, and it kind of loses that charm a little bit when you lose those kinds of things, I feel like.
I like the mistakes. They're fun.
When I was reading about this movie, I saw that apparently there was talk of doing a remake of this movie, and I just don't think there's a worse idea possible.
There are a lot of movies out there that, you know, we all think should never be remade. I think Princess Bride has to be at the top of that list. It's like lightning in a bottle, perfect casting, perfect director, great script. Any attempt to recreate it, I feel like the jokes would be attempting to recreate past performances instead of trying to do something new and exciting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the script is the biggest thing for me. Is just like, you know, the guy, like William Goldman wrote the book and wrote the screenplay, so you can't like get a more like perfect like adaptation in that sense. And it's just so funny and so witty and so clever. It's like, what else would you even do? What would you even want to do? Like, there's no missed opportunities in this movie. Everything you could want. That's why it's the perfect fairy tale. It's just, it does everything. It has all the tropes. It has all the themes that you would want to see. What element can you improve upon?
Money.
Just just re-release it in theaters. It'll make $1 billion.
Yeah, I mean, I would go see it in theaters. I've never seen it in theaters before. Imagine, movies like Rocky Horror Picture Show, you go see, and everybody is a diehard fan. They all yell at the screen and stuff. When I saw the 40th anniversary of Jaws in the theater, Jaws is my favorite movie of all time. So going to see it in the theater for the 40th anniversary, the crowd was screaming, yelling when big moments were about to happen. Oh shit! When Alex Kittner got eaten, and when the shark blew up at the end, the entire place started clapping and standing up and screaming, "Woo!" And that's an experience that I will never forget. And I'm probably going to do the same thing for the 50th anniversary coming up in 1 year. I would love to see The Princess Bride in a theater and just see, the moments that make the crowd laugh the most, see if there's anything anybody yells. I would love to have that kind of interaction with the rest of the crowd, because every time I've seen it, it's just been by myself or like with you or my girlfriend or whatever. So
you're right. This is such like a fun crowd movie. This is a movie you watch like with people that you like share with like your friends and your family, because it's just so fun and it's so magical. You don't really get that sense of magic when you just watch it by yourself. You have to experience it with others. That's what makes it so powerful.
Dude, I'm having some kind of incoming memory. I might have forced Christian to watch Princess Bride at my house a couple of years ago after college, and I think he did like it more. I think I did.
Oh, okay.
Already. So
character arc for Christian.
If that's true, I'm going to ask Christian later today before he sees this podcast, obviously. And if he says yes, then I apologize, Christian. If that's a fallacy and I was showing it to somebody else, you know what? I think I showed it to Josh, and I think he liked it. So I think I am wrong. We'll have to wait and see. I'll have to talk to Christian. To be continued. If not, he needs his redemption arc.
Is there anything else you want to address about the movie? I feel like I said everything I can say. I love it to death. It's so funny. It's just a great time. I could have watched it right after I finished it, and I would have enjoyed it just the same. It's one of those kinds of movies,
Yeah, dude. I feel like, when we opened this podcast, I said I feel like it's a movie that gets better every time you watch it, and it really is true. It only gets better. You notice more things. You notice more subtle dialogue from someone, maybe a line that you never heard before. You hear it on your next viewing. I can't give it anything but a giant 10 out of 10 perfection, thumbs up. It's beautiful. The music's great. The story has payoffs in every single direction. There's an arc for almost everybody. I'd say Fezzik is the only one that doesn't really have a full circle. He kind of is a good guy from the beginning, just doing stuff for money. And then at the end, he's a good guy just helping his friends that he already had. But it doesn't matter. Maybe not everybody needs a full arc, but everyone else's story, has a satisfying conclusion.
I 100% agree. Every character is fun, is perfectly cast. It's an exciting story, and it's a heartfelt story. It's the perfect fairy tale. I already said it, and I'll say it again. It's just perfect every single second, every frame.
All right, well, I guess if we have nothing else to say, we can just end it here. Everybody, if you made it to this point, we really appreciate you sticking around. And tune in next week for Goblin Talk. I'm not sure which guest I'm going to have yet. And then the following Friday, we will have another episode of the MMF podcast with me and Nick. So have a great rest of your day, and thank you again.